We left off at the...
We're so glad you remember.
I remember we left off when we were beginning to talk about the stores in the community. There were 4 different locations of stores in this community. One was run by a man named Mr. Ali Calloway, and that store was located on what is now the corner of Little Lot and Old Low Point Road. Of course, it was not there when I was big enough to remember, but I remember hearing my parents talk about the store that was run by Mr. Ali Calloway. The first store that I remember being here in the community is a house that is now owned by private family, and its location is right across this entrance to the Nichols Manor Drive on the Old Low Point Road. Mr. Charlie and his wife, Miss Ida Marks, ran that store. They moved from Chester up here, and they ran that store. When they stopped the store here, they moved to Low Point and built the store up to Low Point. Down the road from the store where the Marks lived, going towards Stevensville for about a half mile down, just before you got to the curve in the road, Mr. Philip Groman and his wife, Miss Lena, built a store. That store was run by Mr. Fikey. We call him Mr. Fikey instead of Mr. Philip Groman, and his wife. Then his children also ran that store. The first of his children was Aaron and his wife Gussie. The second of his children was Molly and her husband Morris Bernstein. And the third of the children who ran the store was Sophie and Max Solomon. They then bought the house, Sophie and Max bought the house that was where the first store, where Mr. Charlie and Miss Ida Marks lived. And by the way, it's right beside where the school, the Low Point School, is located. Mr. Groman then bought the Low Point School.
Yeah, where was the Low Point School located?
Right to the end of this road.
Okay, this is the one.
Right on the corner of Lot Road and Old Low Point Road.
Right.
Little Lot Road is the next road up. And he, in his later years, opened a store there. And he ran it for 2 or 3 years until his death. And we have not had a store up here since. But I remember when the state road was being built up here, we called that the state road, and this was the county road over here. Mr. Fonza Thomas's son-in-law was killed driving a truck carrying the material to help to build that road, and he got the truck stopped on the railroad track, and he couldn't get it started, and the train ran into the truck, and the man got killed.
Was there a store all the way up closer to Low Point?
Mr. Charlie Marks.
That was Mr. Marks' store.
Mr. Charlie Marks had the store up there. Then there was a store further up, right across from Hotel Fillmore. And I remember the Frantums, Mr. Addison Frantum's family ran that. Because he had a brother named Blunt, and they were in that store. And then there was Mr. Fleckenstein, who had it after The Phantoms had it. I don't know who had it after Mr. Fleckenstein had it, or before it closed, but I knew of those two stores on Love Point.
Yeah, I remember some of those names are familiar
I
to
don't
me.
remember any of that.
How about the trains? When the train was going up, can you tell us anything about the train?
The train used to go from Love Point on down on the eastern shore of Maryland, and it would stop at Love Point. That was the last station that it stopped to, and it would go down to Stevensville Station, right up the street a little bit from where you used to live.
Yeah, I remember the train.
And then it went down to Chester, and it stopped down there, and it stopped at Graysonville, and all along up to Centerville, and right on down the line. I remember when we would be at Love Point and we had to come home, if we were lucky enough to have the money to get on the train, we would ride from Love Point down to Stevensville, because it was closer to walk from Stevensville up here on the lot than it was to walk from Love Point down here on the lot. So we would get a ride on the train.
How did it get the name The Lot?
It's called the Lot.
How did it get that name? You
I
know?
don't know. Now they call it Lots Road, but it was always on the lot.
I wonder if there was a family by that name.
Not that I know of.
Oh, well, I've forgotten the name of the train system.
I can't tell you.
As many times as I saw it too. And we used to go out and put 2 straight pins across before the train came, and then when the train ran over, it'd be like little scissors. Do you recall anything? There was a restaurant right up there by Love Point, just sort of when you got off the Smoky Joe and came down on the left.
Mr. Messersmith ran that restaurant, and my aunt used to cook for him after the big hotel closed. She had, Mr. Messersmith had, and then Mr. Lynch had the last. And Mr. Lynch lives off in Basinville. Mr. Messersmith used to get my aunt to make gowns of homemade dressing for potato salad and chicken salad and stuff like that. And she would make it, and then he would come down from Baltimore, carry it back to Baltimore, and use it in the restaurant up in Baltimore.
So he had a restaurant in Baltimore.
He had a restaurant in Baltimore too.
Is that the place that later turned into like a bar?
Oh yes, it was.
Yeah.
It was the hot spot, because I do remember Daddy would
was.
take us up on a summer evening, and we would just sit in the car and listen to the music. We never went
Right.
inside.
That's right.
Right, but they used to have good music.
They used to have dances up there to the big hotel, and they didn't have dances at the Hotel Fillmore because it was too small. But in the summertime, they would have dances at the big hotel, and the young ladies would go up there, and with the young gentlemen, and they would have a good time.
And a lot of people came over from Baltimore. That was a honeymoon site, wasn't it?
They would come over from Baltimore, and they would stay sometime a week at a time, like that. And then someone would come over just for a day. They would call ahead of time, let the people at the restaurant know, or the hotel at that time know how many was coming.
Who actually owned the hotel?
I really don't know who owned Hotel Love Point, but I do know that Miss Nanny Legg owned Hotel Fillmore. Miss Nanny Legg was the mother-in-law of Dr. Kemp. Bill Kemp's father was a doctor, and he married one of Miss Nanny's daughters. She had 2 daughters, and I've been trying to think of what Dr. Kemp's wife's name was, but the other one was Miss May. And Miss May, after her sister died and her mother died, raised the sister's 2 boys. It was Phil and Percy. Now Percy, when he grew up, he went to Baltimore to live. But Phil stayed up on Low Point with his Aunt May until she died.
I think everybody knew Phil Campbell.
Everybody knew Phil Campbell.
I didn't know.
I know him.
I think he must have died up around Centerville somewhere.
He did.
Mhm.
He moved down to the wharf.
Yeah. I hadn't seen him for years before he died. But that's the last time I heard anybody say where he was, and was up in Centerville. Now, I don't know who owns that place now, but I imagine it's just a plain home or something like that.
I do believe it's still there. I was just trying to think if it had been torn down.
Fillmore, it's still
Yeah.
there.
It's still there. Has that
Yeah,
big
it's still
porch
there.
on the front.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bessie, did you tell us the name of your parents? We'd like to do the
Oh,
heritage that
my
and
mother's-
your grandparents as far back as you could go.
Well, as far back as I can remember, on my grandmother's side, on my father's side rather, my great-grandmother was named Henrietta Hamilton, and she lived in Orange County, Virginia, in a little town named Jerusalem. And that's where my grandmother, who was my father's mother, was born. And her name was Lucinda Fisher. But the lady who took her to work for her decided that Lucinda was not the type of name for a working black girl, so she named her Annie. And she was Annie from that day on. And my father's name was James Dorsey. He was born in Rockville, Maryland. And when he was 13, my grandmother went to Rockville and picked him up and brought him over here to Kent Island. And that's where he lived the rest of his days. He died when he was 62 years old, right in this house. On my, and my grandmother, that was his mother, the picture you see there. That was the grandmother who was born in Virginia. On my mother's side of the family, the great-grandmother that I remember was named Hester Himes. That was her maiden name, was Himes. She married Harris, Daniel Harris. And of course, that's why I named the lane Harris Lane. Grandmother Hester had one son, and let's see, from the Ida and Jamie and Honey. She had 4 daughters, because Aunt Mary didn't have any children. But the oldest of her daughters was my grandmother, and her name was Ida Lee. And I'm sure you remember her. She lived down in Stevensville, and she was the Lee family were the only black families that lived in Stevensville for a long time. And they lived on the land which later was sold to John Henry Tolson. And he and Miss Icky lived there. And the little house is still in the back. The little white house is still in the back. That was where my grandmother and her husband and his family lived. And then after her husband died, then she moved back home here on this land. And my mother's name was Edna Dorsey, but she was Edna Wright Dorsey. And she married James Dorsey. And the result was me and my sister.
It was just 2 of you?
Just 2 of us. 14 years difference. And I used to tell Mother that she didn't intend for me to be here. I was a mistake. But anyway, that's where the family line, how it came down.
And your children?
Uh-huh.
You want to name your children?
I have, right now, 4 who are living. The oldest is Edward Irvin. The next is Ernest Wrightson, and I shouldn't say Wrightson because he hates it so badly. But anyway, that's what his name is. The next one is James Arnold, and the youngest is Michael Anthony. And
all boys?
All boys. I had 2 other boys. One was a stillborn, and the other one was accidentally killed in an automobile accident that was up this road here. Mr. Smouse, do you remember Mr. Smouse, the insurance man? He was the one that was hit him with the car and killed him. And then, of course, my daughter, and she was the only child, girl, died when she was 46 years old from lung cancer.
So you did have a daughter?
Yes, and this is her, and this is her youngest, her only child. She was 12 years old when her mother died, and I raised her. You know, got pictures all over the house of her. I think she thinks she was the only one that was in the family because every time you turn around, she had a picture stuck somewhere, and I've taken a whole lot of them down. But I have 5 grandchildren and 4 step-grandchildren. I have 4 great-grandchildren and 4 step-great-grandchildren. And my husband been dead for a long time. He died right after, a year after my daughter died. So that's about all I can tell you. I was went to high school. We walked from up here down to Dennis Garage every day, rain, shine, didn't make any difference. And when we first went to high school, the bus didn't come any further than down to Dennis Garage. And the parents would have to pay $20 per semester per child for that child to ride to school. And believe it or not, the children went there to school. Now, they don't care whether they go to school or not. The school bus can come right out here to the front door. And they lay in the bed. And it's terrible.
Why do you think that is?
Because the parents are not interested enough into the children to make them get off of their behind and get out there. My parents believed in education, and they got as much education as they could. When we went to school, we didn't go to school in September when the white children went to school. We couldn't go until in October, after the crops, the tomato plants and things had been picked. We had to stay out of school until school was, you know, those things were. And we didn't stay in school until June. We closed, our school closed in May. So most parents wanted their children to have some kind of education. If you were lucky enough to graduate from the 7th grade, you were doing very well, colored children. And if you were extra lucky, maybe you had a relative or somebody who lived in Baltimore, say, for instance, and they would say, well, send them up here and I will put them in school up there. So we had several people from the island to go away to go to school. But none of them were able to actually send them to boarding school or anything like that, you know. You were just lucky if you had somebody who would take them. And so it just makes me so disgusted with the parents to see how they're not interested now to see to it that the children can get an education. There are all kinds of grants for them to go to college. They don't care. They really don't care. I don't know, it used to be a saying that if somebody gave you something, you didn't appreciate it as much as you do if you earned it yourself. And I believe it's right.
I think so too.
I really believe it's the truth.
Do you have any memories of any of the funerals or weddings or how they...
I know that when people would be sick in the community and they expected them to pass, my mother and my Aunt Janie would go along with other people to the house, and they would set up nights with the family. They would cook food for the family, you know, like that. When the person died, they would then in turn wash the body and lay the body out on what they call a cooling board. It would be no more than the ironing board, and they did that. Then the undertaker would come and bury him. They buried him within 3 days.
They didn't embalm them back
They
then.
didn't embalm him then. I did hear talk of one time an undertaker had a body, and he removed the innards from the body and buried that first. Then the body was able to, they were able to keep the body maybe a day or two longer, you know. But other than that, and nobody, they didn't have you going and viewing at the church or at the funeral home or like they do now.
Did they have a service from the home?
No, they had it at church.
They had it at the
They didn't have a viewing.
They didn't have a viewing. You went to church for the funeral.
Now, see, my grandfather, he was laid out at our house. And
My grandfather was buried, laid out in my Aunt Ella's house.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But they were embalmed still.
Right.
Yeah, well, see, the same thing applied here. When my little boy got killed, after the undertaker embalmed him, then they brought him back home here. And we laid him out in the coffin here, and people came and viewed the body the night before. Then the next day they moved him to the church, and they had church service.
Did they do anything like, I know maybe 100 years before your time, they used to put the black things on the mirrors, and they stopped the clock and all that kind of
They
thing?
did that. They put crepe on the door.
Now, putting a crepe on the door, does that mean just putting black cloth over the door?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And they also, the men wore a black band around the arm when they went to the funeral. The women all had to wear black. And for I don't know how long after the funeral, like the wives would wear black if they went out somewhere. They would have to wear black.
And I think they used to put a spray of flowers by the door.
My father, he used to say when he'd come down to work and he'd come knock on my door and I was still in bed, he'd say, I should have hung a crepe on your door, like I was dead. You
Like
know?
we were dead,
And I can remember somewhere, somehow, seeing some kind of a wreath on somebody's door, and when you went by, you knew that they had a dead, person at their house. Someone had died.
Were there any old-time remedies? I know doctors were also scarce in the area during that time. When someone was sick, did you have any home remedies that you used?
They could go out in the fields and things and find all kinds of plants and doctor them up, like if you had a swelling of the leg, like if you sprained your ankle or something like that, they would go get something and they would pound it up and put it on your, make a poultice out of it and put it around your ankle or your arm or something like that. They put, if you had a headache, they would take white potatoes, thinly slice them, put them on a cloth and put the potato around your head. The potato would turn black. But you know why the potato turned black. Later on we realized why it turned black, because it got the oxygen, you know, and the oxygen turned that potato black.
But they thought
it would turn black anyhow if you had.
They thought it was bringing something out of the
right,
head.
They thought it was making you the headache go, but it really wasn't. But it was something that they had in their mind, and apparently mind over matter, I guess.
It worked. Sometimes it worked.
And we used to go out, and they had different kinds of herbs, grasses and things like that they would come in and they cook, make a meal out of them. They had goose tongue and lamb's quarters and watercress and all those kinds of things. You don't really see them anymore because they put so much fertilizer and stuff on the ground, it kills all that kind of stuff.
And pesticides. I don't
That's
think you
right.
want to eat it
My mother
today.
picked watercress till 5 years before she died.
Well,
She'd always go out and pick watercress.
I was saying this just a couple of weeks ago. I said, this winter, I have not seen any watercress, and they told me that one fella had been picking some. But I usually get some watercress every winter. But goose tongue and all that kind of stuff,
I never heard of it.
But we used to get all that kind of stuff. At school, on Pancake Day, they would come out there and make pancakes and serve them to the children. We had an old coal stove, you know, and the women would make up the pancake batter at home, come out to school and fry the pancakes, and that was a treat for us. It was also a treat like when we had the last day of school, we'd have a picnic, and we would have the flagpole where you know,
Maypole.
yeah,
Maypole
the maypole,
band.
yeah, and they would play ball and all like that, and this teacher, her husband preached over in Caroline County, and those people over there raised a lot of strawberries, and she would bring strawberries to us, and we would have strawberries, and that was wonderful because we didn't get strawberries over here at that time. And those were, I remember the Depression when people was without food and all like that, and I can remember the weather being so cold sometimes, and it was snowing, and the men would have to go out and cut paths to go down to Stevensville. One time the bread truck came through, and he was going up Love Point to go catch the boat, and got stuck in all this snow, and he couldn't get out, so he got out and came on the lot here and stopped at somebody's house and asked if some of the men would help him dig his way out. And he emptied his truck, gave all these people all these goodies, you know. It's two houses up here now that were part of some of the material that came down from the Johnstown flood. The house all the way down to the end of Lots Road, and it looks like it's falling down. Eventually, my son's going to have it torn down, but we're waiting now for it to go through, you know, some law things. That house and the original part of this house, part of it was made out of material that flowed down Chesapeake Bay from the John County flood.
Or they pick it up on the beach, or
Picked it up on the beach.
I heard somebody else's house. It wasn't my mother's. I don't know whose it was. That they said they used for it. Well, I
Now,
guess.
remember when in 1979, my son came home and tore out all the inside out of this house and insulated it. And I went around and collected all of those nails that I could collect. They were cut nails, you know, the square cut nails from the old part of the house. And I don't know what they was trying to do with them, but I was saving them because I knew they were old nails, you know. But that's where some of the material came from. Not all of it, but some of it came from.
Bessie, getting back to the funerals, I can remember sitting on my mother's front porch. Do the black people have women that they called mourners? Particular women, they dressed in white or something?
Now, you're talking about the Women's Society. Like when we have a society, you know about the Women's Society. And whenever a member of the Women's Society died, then we would turn out in the white. And that would be in the time of the year when white would be appropriate. If it was in the winter time, we would put on black. But now, these young people have gotten away from that, and they wear anything. The immediate family wear red and yellow and blue and all that kind of stuff. Now tomorrow, we're having our annual Women's Day, and they're going to be turning out in white. And every woman that belongs to the Women's Society will turn out in white. So you'll see them
I might
in
have to go sit on Mom's front porch, huh?
And we're going to serve lunch afterwards. But that's what they do.
There was always some good aromas flowing over from that church.
They cook, my Lord. I told them, please, when I die, do not cook anything. If anybody comes from anywhere and needs something to eat, take them up to McDonald's or Hollis or somewhere like that and give them something to eat. I have worked too hard in these kitchens preparing food, and the people come in there and eat like pigs. And some of them you don't see only until there is a funeral.
Oh, yeah.
And they eat, and then they carry out, can I have a plate for this one? Can I have a plate for the other one? And you'd be surprised how much food goes out just like that to people that you don't even know sometimes. So I told them, no, don't do that. But I don't know, they're going to do it, I guess. As long as somebody's there who's able to do so. Our women are getting old now, they can't afford to.
Who delivered the babies when you were little? Did you have a midwife or?
Yeah, we had midwives. My husband's grandmother was a midwife, and there were 2 or 3 down Bass Neck. Bessie Tolson, Grandmother Sally Tolson,
Have to go get Aunt
Miss Harriet Buck Stansbury.
Harriet. And who's Aunt Harriet?
Aunt Harriet Buck Stansbury. Yeah.
I've heard of her before.
Yeah, she delivered one of my children. She delivered Ernest. The second one, first one was born in the hospital. She delivered the second one, Miss Stella Lord from over in Carmichael.
How'd you get word to somebody in Carmichael that you're going to have a baby?
You let them know ahead of time, and they
come and stay.
You let them know ahead of time.
And who were the doctors in the area?
The first doctor that I remember was Dr. Henry, and he lived back here on the farm. But I don't remember us ever going to him. We might have, but I don't remember us going to him. But Dr. Sadamar and Dr. Snyder were the doctors that I went to. And off Queenstown was Dr. Price. And then it was Dr. Lowe and those doctors in that building where there were 2 or 3 doctors together in Queenstown. But there was, as I said, Dr. Kemp, and then Dr. Benton was Miss Sadamar's father. Miss Elizabeth Sadamar, that was her father. John Benton's father.
When you had a baby, did you have to stay in bed for a couple of weeks?
You stayed in bed for a couple of weeks. You stayed in the house for a whole month. They wouldn't let you come outdoors for a whole month. Now that's a fact.
You have the baby one day, and the next day to go to Walmart now.
Well, can you think of anything we've left out? I think we've talked about religious holidays and school activities and family, any particular family traditions you had? Christmas or Thanksgiving or Easter or...
Christmas we always, I did from the time we were little, we always had Christmas tree. It wasn't these that were, you know, that went to the store and bought. We'd go in somebody's woods and cut down a tree, haul it home and decorate it. Sometimes it would be decorated with just paper things, or eventually we got to the point where we could get 1 or 2 Christmas balls and hang on the tree like that. Children didn't get a whole lot of toys like they get now, but I think they appreciated it more because I would get like a doll.
My mother could remember everything she got for every Christmas till she was about 12 years old, because she only got 1 or 2 things.
That's right. I would get a doll, and my niece, who was 3 years younger than me, she got a doll. Her grandmother was more able to give her because she was the only young grandchild, and she would give her maybe a set of dishes or a doll carriage, but she knew that she was going to get a doll from us. And excuse me. Hello? We would get those type of toys, maybe a ball or something like that. Then later on, as we got a little bit older, we would get, maybe my nephew would get a truck or something of that sort. When my children came along, they got a little bit more, and they would also get some clothes. Now, got a grandson that gets all of, what's one of them stores that they sell nothing but children's
Toys R Us.
Toys R Us. He gets half of Toys R Us. And he gets them not only when he's going to Christmas or Howard's birthday, he gets it all the time. And I said to him, Ernest, don't give him all that kind of stuff. I said, because he doesn't need it.
And they don't care, you take care of it?
Don't take care of it. He throws it around and all that kind of stuff, you know. His mother gives him, Ernest gives him. We give him. So I stopped giving him. I'll give him like $50 for his birthday. Put it in the bank for him. You know, like that. He don't need nothing to play with. He's 5 years old. He needs to go to school. And he needs to learn how to behave himself. That was one of the things that we had to do. We had to behave. We had to honor the older people. If we were out and did something wrong and the older person said anything to us about it, and they said, you go home and tell your mother that I did such and such thing to you, you better go home and tell her. Because if you didn't, when they saw the mother and told them, you're going to get a whipping. So you might as well just go ahead and tell them in the beginning and get it over with. You know?
That was what I was going to ask you next, if there were any words of wisdom you'd like to
That's
leave
right.
us with.
That's exactly what they would do. We would have to honor them. They made us go to church. We had to have prayers. Every night we would be down around my sister or my mother. They would read Bible stories to us every night. Then we would pray, get our night clothes on, and then we'd go to bed. We said grace every time we ate a meal. We had to thank God for it. And I do it right now. I train my children up with that. It doesn't hurt you to say thank you because it doesn't cost anything. And I used to always tell the children, it doesn't cost anything to say thank you, please, yes ma'am, no ma'am. I don't care who you are. Respect the person. And they will respect you. And if they don't respect you, that's on them. It's not on you. And that's what I've taught my children all my life. That's what I was taught. And I've gotten along pretty good, thank the Lord.
Well, we certainly do thank you, Ms. Tolson, on behalf of the Kent Island Heritage Society. It was a great interview.
Well, good.
So thanks a lot.
That Bessie used to go to when she was a little girl. Point Road, Stevensville, Maryland.